Hey guys, I just came across a video on morality made by an atheist called QualiaSoup. Now I actually agree with most of what he says in that video. He attempted to explain how objective morality can exist without God, which I don't think he did at all, but he does have some interesting insight on morality. It's definitely worth a look. So let's start it off with a clip from his video.
So on what do we base morality? We know it's not power. The one with the gun might have the means to impose their wishes, but this tells us nothing about their principles. We know it's not majority preference. If the spectacle of human sacrifice is the preferred entertainment of the majority, this doesn't make human sacrifice right. We know it's not tradition. The fact that a practice may have endured for generations tells us nothing about its virtue. And although what's written in law may largely reflect what a society deems right or wrong, we know law doesn't determine morality. Laws can be unjust.
So, a description about what you should or shouldn't do, regardless of power, preference, tradition, or law. That's objective morality. And the most common objection to objective morality is called the argument from disagreement. Now, although QualiaSoup doesn't specifically call that argument out by name, he does spend the next portion of his video explaining how there can be right or wrong answers to moral questions, even if people disagree. Now, I made a video addressing that argument, and ironically, we came up with not only some of the same points, but even some of the same analogies. I thought that was kind of neat. But what we agree on is that even if people disagree about facts about reality, such as whether young girls are witches, whether a fetus is a baby, whether reincarnation is true, or whether or not Jews are subhuman, then we'll have different moral conclusions even if we're appealing to the same moral principles. For example, while humans may recognize that killing non-consenting people solely for entertainment is wrong, history shows us that certain cultures, like the Romans or the Nazis for example, mistakenly believed that some groups of people were subhuman. And if they mistakenly classify someone as subhuman, then they may also mistakenly believe that they are not violating any moral principles if they kill a member of that group solely for entertainment. Errors in reasoning cause you to misapply moral principles. Misinformation is kind of like a dirty lens. It's going to skew your perception of reality. So misinformation about reality can cause you to accidentally be immoral. And we can see this most clearly in children. A young child may throw sand in another kid's face, having no idea that he's causing the other kid harm. So it's not that he thinks hurting other children is good, it's that he just doesn't realize the consequences of his own actions. Which brings me to the next point I wanted to comment on.
We don't base morality on revelation from authority. That would render us merely obedient. Moral behaviour is doing what's right, not what we're told. Unless, of course, what we're told is also what's right.
The role of a command is not to create morality. Rather, it's to inform us of what is moral. Let's think back to that parent and child analogy. Ideally, the parent has more information than the child, and also ideally, the parent has noble motives. So when they command the child not to throw sand, they're merely informing them that the child's actions were inconsistent with moral principles. The command is supposed to be a way of removing ignorance, preventing the child from acting on the basis of a rationalization or some kind of misinformation. Now, like children, adults can be inexperienced, fed misinformation by other members of their society, not spent enough time checking their facts, or could be trying to subconsciously rationalize some behavior that they do. As QualiaSoup and the Bible would argue in Romans 2:15, we have innate knowledge of morality. That being said, that innate knowledge alone is not going to stop children from throwing sand or adults from rationalizing their immoral behavior. So having commands from a trustworthy parent or from an omniscient, omnibenevolent deity is certainly not a bad thing. But don't be confused into thinking that I'm arguing the commands themselves are the basis of morality. Let's look at what he has to say about intuitions.
If intuition tells us something's immoral, we ask what triggers the intuition. There must be valid reasons. And once we're dealing with valid reasons, we're having a conversation that has no need to refer to scripture or authority, divine or otherwise. Valid reasons are available to us all.
Intuitions don't tell us why something is wrong. For example, intuition could never answer the question, why is causing harm sometimes wrong? Rather, intuition explains the answer to the question, how do we know that causing harm is sometimes wrong? Intuition deals with epistemology, and epistemology is basically the study of how we know stuff. Intuition is just one way that we come to know stuff. So while intuition may be the way that both you and I come to realize that causing harm is morally wrong, that alone doesn't provide either of us with a basis for morality. Alright, let's take a look at a couple more things before we wrap up.
The worry that without religion or gods we've no basis on which to discuss morality is without foundation.
The moral argument does not claim that we need God in order to discuss morality. Similar to how you can read a newspaper and have no idea where that newspaper came from, you can recognize objective morality, talk about it, and even behave morally without realizing that God must be the foundation for objective morality. In the same way you don't have to believe in printing presses in order to be able to read a newspaper, you don't have to believe in God in order to be able to discuss morality. Now the goal of your video seemed to be to disprove the moral argument. The moral argument only has two premises, so let's take a quick look. If God does not exist, objective morality does not exist. Objective morality exists, therefore God exists. It's actually pretty simple. If the first two statements are true, then the conclusion must also be true. Now you seem to focus on disproving the first premise. Now unfortunately, you never demonstrated anything which contradicted that premise. You never showed how God's nature could not be the basis for objective morality, nor did you ever show how naturalism could provide that basis. And it also seems that you just accepted and even gave a couple reasons for why the second premise is true. So while you do have some interesting insight on morality, when it comes to the moral argument, you seem as if you've just got us halfway closer to accepting it and no closer to disproving it. As always, test everything, hold on to the good.